Hello everyone and welcome to Be My Guest with me, Mary Honan, on Lir Media TV, supporting the Samaritans, Limerick and Tipperary. And if you could click our subscribe button on the bottom left-hand side or your right-hand side of the screen on YouTube, we'd much appreciate it. We're trying to reach 1,000 subscribers. And today I'm with a wonderful episode 4 of our what's going to be called our Netflix series with Dr. John Cullinane, historian with the Irish Dancing Commission on Comisiúna Rinca Gaeilge, and we're going to be talking about pioneering Irish dancing, CLRG in USA, Canada, Australia and South Africa. Hello John, how are you?
Hello, Mary. Very good indeed. Very good. Surviving everything.
Oh God, it's just the weather is miserable.
Yeah, but we're in lockdown, everything. So
how is lockdown? How are you coping with lockdown, John?
Well, pretty good, really. When I found that it was inevitable that it was coming up, I went out and did a good big shopping and filled up my freezer and things like that. And I must say, like, Zoom meetings are keeping me occupied, but I miss, like, I can't travel out to my sister who's only a few miles out the road from me, kind of, and things like that. So,
yeah.
But I try to get out for a walk every day. That's important, So,
would you consider yourself a very organized person, John? I'm looking at all your little post-it notes behind you, clipped up on the board. The other side.
Oh, yeah. No, I wouldn't consider myself very organized. I consider myself so old and bothered now that unless I put everything up there on the wall, I will forget about it. And on the other wall over there, I have my diary with the dates and the times filled in. I laugh. I have one up there which is a doctor's appointment for 2021 for July or something. And
I never have a doctor's appointment that far ahead. The dentist is probably the only one I'd have marked in.
So I laugh at that and I say, well, he must think that I'm okay anyhow.
Yeah,
banking on that for that far ahead. Thank God.
Yeah. But John, you qualified as an AD in 1970.
Yes, I'll just give you a brief background. I qualified as an AD in 1970. Now, that was just the time of the split.
Yeah.
So very shortly afterwards, I was asked to do a small exam as an examiner in Dublin in 1972. Now, the remarkable short distance was a lot of the examiners who were with the commission were now gone Kull, you see.
That's right.
I'm in no illusions about why. And then
you underestimate yourself, John. Well, you underestimate yourself. I know you said in one of the interviews that had many of them not converted or gone solely with Kull, you mightn't have had the opportunity of being an examiner, but I absolutely think you would.
Well, you see, the other thing is that in 1970, at the time of the split, I was already a PhD several years, and I was a lecturer and an examiner for the National University of Ireland.
Yeah.
So I did a small exam in Dublin. There was about 3 Americans over doing it. I think, what's her name? Mary Lou Shade was one of the candidates. But that as it is, Tony Nolan and myself, like, we were then new examiners and we were up and in demand. And around the same time, Tony went to Australia and he went to New Zealand. And by 1974, I was out in San Francisco with Mary Walsh. And there in 1974, we conducted the first, the exams there in San Francisco, and we had SDCRGs as well. And we also adjudicated what was the first West Coast Oireachtas in 1974. So since then, I have, I've had the opportunity that, a great opportunity. I was on the board of examiners from very early age and young. And so combine that with the fact that I had long holidays kind of in university, and I was always kind of available for exams overseas, Australia in particular, and I was able to go if wanted and for as long as I wanted, because I blended in my travel with my botanical interests. Like in 1970s, thanks to the dancing, I was traveling through parts of Asia and tropical rainforests. And then when I got to Australia, I was looking at all the flora and fauna.
Yeah.
And mad to get up the barrier reef and so on. So the two were totally compatible. I mean, at one stage when I was on my way to Australia, I stopped over in the Philippines and I was a guest professor there.
Sorry, can you hold a second, John? Would you mind holding? Now try it, Pat. I can cut out this section. Yeah, I know. It just came off. Can you fix it? I'm doing an interview. Yeah, you did. But because I told you I had Dr. John Cullinane on. So just 1 second, John.
No problem.
Pat. Now I'm back to you, John. Sorry, there's a problem with that one of our doors. If you pull it too far, it comes off the hinges, and you can't open it to come in. It just comes off the runner. But sorry for interrupting. If you repeat that sentence again.
As I say, I was able to combine my two interests. One stage going to do exams in Australia. I stopped off in the Philippines, and I was a visiting associate professor there, giving courses to their students, even lecturing about Irish bogs, and so on. And
because you are a botanist.
I'm primarily a botanist, plant scientist, just another name for it, and specifically interested in the marine side of the botany.
How did you, before we go back on to, how did you get interested in that, John?
Well,
why botany? You must have a magnificent garden.
Oh, no.
I know it's marine biology and marine.
I think it's a totally different thing. That's kind of horticulture.
Yeah.
Botany or plant science involves genetics, DNA, and so on and so forth, ecology, the environment, and so on.
Okay.
And gardening is totally different. So I got interested in it because we went to our summer holidays down in Cork Harbour. My family had a summer house and we spent all our days down there. And I was not one for sitting on the rocks. We didn't have a beach there, rocks.
Yeah.
And I was always off over investigating the rock pools and the flora and fauna in the rock pools. And that led on to my interest then in botany, and in particular the marine side of botany. And I lectured in UCC on that for 40 odd years.
Wow.
I tend to do everything in kind of 40 years. Like I was an examiner for 40 years, over 40 years, etc. So,
Are you still examining, John?
sorry?
Are you still an examiner?
No, you retire when you come to your 75th birthday. And I retired, I'm 81 now, so I'm retired 6 years ago. But as I say, I got on very early after my AD, so I managed to serve 43 years as an examiner, taking me all over the world to America and Canada, and about 70 odd locations doing exams, including the first exams in Canada. And I just like to talk about those for
yeah, absolutely.
Okay. In 1975, following my being in San Francisco and so on, I was invited along with Molly Farley and Mary Walsh,
Yeah.
two very loyal and long-serving examiners. We were invited to Edmonton in Canada. It's in center of Canada over towards the Rockies, and it is in the province of Alberta. Now, at the time we went there, we were to do a feis there because there was a good Irish society in Edmonton, and they had a feis going in 1974. I think Maureen Hall was the first one to adjudicate it. And then in 75, they invited us out, and we also conducted examinations in Edmonton.
Wow.
Now,
it's a country I'd love to see, Canada.
Oh, it is.
I've never been there.
Fascinating, particularly around Edmonton. You're on the fringe of the prairies with the wheat growing for miles and miles in areas, and then you are at the start of the Rocky Mountains.
You know, I have a very I said it to Paddy O'Donnell and Deirdre Penk, that every time I think of the Rocky, or I think of Canada, I think of the Gendarmerie Royale de Canada, and I think of Nelson Eddy and Janet MacDonald, and you know, and Paddy said, well, Mary, not every Canadian is going around, he said, looking like a Rocky, like a Canadian Mountie. But I have this very glamorous image of Canada, and I just have this very romantic image, and it probably goes back to watching movies with like Nelson Eddy and Janet MacDonald singing "When I'm Calling You." That's my image of Canada.
Yeah. We conducted the exams there. Now, at the time we went there 75, there was only one teacher in Edmonton. That was a person called Celia Devine.
Okay.
She was only holding on by her teeth because she was in poor health. And so there was a large number of dancers in Irish society and everything, but they didn't have a teacher. And at that stage, by the way, the only teacher over beyond the Rockies was Violet Moore, who taught for many, many years. So we conducted the exams, and as a result of that, then you had, you had a Margaret Mullen. She was a terrific teacher up in a place called Fort McMurray. Fort McMurray is a fascinating place.
That's where Paddy O'Donnell went when he first moved to Canada.
Yeah, well now, Margaret Mullen was there in the 70s, and she had a beautiful, fabulous class. But Fort McMurray is about 500 miles north of Edmonton.
Yeah.
And you have to take a flight in there. And it's based on the Athabasca tar sand. In other words, if you're walking on the soil there, the oil is literally squelching up.
Wow.
And so prior to that, they weren't able to extract the oil, but then around that period, they developed the technology to extract it. So there was this huge industry based in the middle of forestry for 500 miles north of Edmonton.
Wow.
So on. So I tell you then, after the fish and the exams, the following day or two, we were free. And some of the Irish society came to me and asked, would I conduct a workshop, because the dancers there had no teacher, and Celia wasn't active and had no problems, gave her consent. In fact, I never met her because of her ill health. So I did a workshop the following day with all the dancers, and really now, like, they had very old material, kind of, and that. So in the meantime, Mary and Molly went off doing what women do.
No better women.
They went off shopping while John blistered his heels doing workshops. Well, that was the start of a lovely romance between me and Alberta, because they came to me, they were very, very impressed by it. It didn't matter what schools or who they learned from, they were all in together. And then they approached me to know, could I do any more workshops for them? And like from Edmonton to Cork is a long way. So I said, yeah, I'd be willing to come out if they would pay the plane fare and all of that. Now, they got on the boat straight away and they actually organized it. So for the next 3 years, I actually went out doing workshops there. This was largely due to the fact that the Albertan government was reeking with filthy rich with money. They had so much taxes coming in, and the Athabasca tar sand and everything. They actually gave, I thought this was heresy, they gave back refunds to people. Half your taxes are coming back to you. Whatever you paid last year, we're giving half that back.
Oh, they should do that here. I'm all for that.
I said I'm in the right place.
But how big is Alberta?
Oh,
because there's from what you've told me already, there's now 23 teachers and 10 adjudicators in Edmonton, isn't there?
More than that, I'll tell you. I went back for the next 3 years, but I was on a grant from the Minister for Sports and Culture, Herr Schlicker, I remember his name, and he couldn't do enough for me, anything I wanted. So I flew all over to the different places in Alberta, including flying down to Calgary. Now, if you never heard of Calgary, you would have been in love with it because it was the other side of Canada. I didn't know it when I went down there. It was famous for its stampede. Stampede is their word for rodeo.
Rodeo, yeah.
It is the largest rodeo show in the whole world. And it was cowboy and Indians and all the racing and the chuck wagon races and all that went on for a week, and the bronco holding onto it and everything.
Did you do it?
Oh, Jesus, no.
Yeah, John, I wouldn't have been able to be there unless I tried something like that.
Oh, no, this was totally professional thing, but it went on for a week. But I'll tell you, when I went down there to Calgary, there was only one person teaching dancing, a person called Agnes Alexander. Now, she had a small bit of dancing, and she taught about 6 little children in her kitchen. She couldn't expand because, first of all, she had a child who needed her full-time attention. That her husband was a surgeon in the hospital. But in those days, Calgary was the back of beyonds, kind of,
Yeah.
and now, as a result of it, I went down and I was teaching Agnes Alexander and her 6 little kids in the kitchen. And that was the first kind of signs of a teaching class. And she did her grades and all that. That's something I'll come on to. I always made it a condition that wherever I went, they did their
grades.
exams. And so I pioneered the first of the grade exams from Canada to America to Australia.
Yeah.
Now,
I think it's important, John. I think I'm sure you do as well, and I know you do, that the basics have to be there, and the basic knowledge of all the traditional sets and traditional hornpipe steps and that. And I think if you can grasp the basics really well, it carries into your advanced dancing.
Yeah, well, as a result of that, then you have 23 TCRGs now teaching in Calgary, but before any of them arrived in Calgary, I had been down there for 3 years in a row doing workshops. Another place a smaller place was Lethbridge, and there was a teacher there just teaching the basics. And I had 2 or 3 days to try and get them to learn a heavy jig. And I tell you, they learned their heavy jig from doing exercises, and they all had new shoes and they had blistered heels and everything.
I know, I remember it oh so well, the blistered heels.
Yeah. And now, I tell you, I remember one morning leaving Lethbridge, and all the kids, they were so lovely and huggy and everything after each lesson, and showing me their blistered heels and how much practice they did. And I really loved them. And the morning I was leaving, I got to the airport. Now the airport is a misnomer, it was a shed and a plane with a propeller outside of it in Lethbridge. So there was no sign of any of the children that morning to say goodbye to me. So long, Dr. John, and we'll see you again next year, Dr. John, so on. And I was really upset over it. So I got to the airport, and they were very cool. They took my bags out and took them in. And they said, no rush now. I said, everyone is on that plane. It was only a 14-seater or something like that. But I said, okay. They took me through the check-in, the shed, and out the other side. And one of the men was carrying my bags out of the plane. All the other passengers around the plane. And as I went out the other side, out over the loudspeaker, I then noticed that dancers were lined up in 2 lines facing each other. And out over the loudspeaker, the way I thought, it came out, and they all started their 2 jig steps, and over it was, and the bass bastard down, and the bass bastard down, and swing up and swing up and swing 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, turn out your feet, and
they taped you
singing, and all of the kids dancing their 2 jig steps, and they got photographs of their certificates with for their grade, whatever it was, having danced their jig steps. Now they're memories that you can't put a price on.
It's just such a pity you didn't have it on tape.
No, I didn't. You see, we hadn't the technologies. This
was
75, nearly 40.
You wouldn't have thought of it. I mean, you just wouldn't have thought of that moment. It's not like now you pick just your mobile phone comes out instantly.
Yeah. You know? And I tell you, I was judging a fish years later for Barbara Blakey in Calgary.
Yeah.
She pointed me out. She didn't know my background connection with Calgary. And it turned out that Merv Bell was playing, and he was a musician, but he knew all about me in Calgary, and he gave beautiful accounts of my pioneering work there. And better still, a cousin or something of Barbara Blakey's heard that I was judging, And she flew up on the Sunday to meet me at lunchtime. And Barbara was excited, this cousin. She said she wants to specifically, she's mad to see Dr. John and so on. And when she came in, we were at lunch and the other adjudicators and musicians with me. And what was she brandishing? And she approached me and she says, and a batter down and a batter down and swing up and swing up and swing 1, 2, 3, 4. She was one of the children that had taken her grade in Lethbridge 40 odd years before.
Wow. Wow. And she ended up the first All-Ireland senior ladies from Canada, wasn't she? Was
yes,
she the first?
That is true, because at the All-Ireland, Barbara Blakey brought her over to me and she said, this man now, she said, was one of the first teaching in that area. And Barbara very nicely, and this girl's parents, they sat down with me and listened to all my stories of how like Calgary was that 40 odd years ago. So I tell you,
and then
I went then to Australia. In fact, my first visit to Australia, because I was really busy around this time. I got an invitation from Geraldine Ryan in Melbourne in 1974 to know would I come out. She was over at the Worlds and she wanted some up-to-date material and she invited me out. So I went out to Melbourne in 1974.
It was a hardship, I'd say.
Oh my God, yes.
And I'm being sarcastic. I'd say that's absolutely fabulous.
I know, I tell you, Anya, then I come back to your that comment. Anya and myself, then Anya, we went out in 1977, just shortly afterwards, to judge the Australian Australian Championships in Adelaide.
Okay.
And we were also conducting exams. Now, in those days, when you conducted exams in Australia, you went from one location to the next. So you were in Perth, you were in Adelaide, you were in Melbourne, you were in Sydney, and then we went up to Brisbane. But in each of those places, in the 1970s, the examiners were expected to do workshops for all the teachers.
Yeah.
Now, it's a lovely reflection now, because they're dancing, they weren't competing at the Worlds and that, but they wanted all the up-to-date material. So that was essential. Whoever was doing the exams was teaching.
Yeah.
I remember going into Ransley's studio in Sydney and we faced with all these dancers. We had 2 separate rooms and I was there laying out my stall and Anya was looking at me and she said, what the hell do you think you're doing? You're like a first aid man with your scissors and your elastoplast and your bandages. And I said, yeah, am I rubbing alcohol? Am my
I told you you were organized.
Yes.
I noticed that about you. I used to go to competitions or go away anywhere judging or whatever, and I'd have needles and thread. If I went away with Bunratty, I'd have needles and thread and a scissors and plasters and everything just in case somebody or I needed them. It was just, and everything. You'd have your shoes rolled up in leg warmers so that they didn't get scratched inside in your suitcase. I can see I'm very organized in certain things. I'm not so organized about my house, but very organized about suitcases and things like that. So I can understand you bringing all that with you.
Anya was laughing at me. And I said, by the time we're finished this tour, Anya, your heels will be bleeding and your toes. She says, Jesus, not Anya. Jesus, I'm not bleeding for any Australian. She said, I'll bleed die for Ireland, all right.
Oh yeah, but she always said that, I'll die for Ireland.
But by the time we were half as through the tour, what have you know? Rub the alcohol. Will that take the sting? I needed an elastoplast for this. So then we went up to Brisbane. Anya, myself, that Brisbane up in Queensland. And at that stage in 1977, it was, there was only one TCRG in all of Queensland. That was Vicky Cox.
Okay.
Vicky Cox was a TCRG because she came down and did the exam in Sydney a few years before that. By the way, before I go on with that, I must reflect on this. I was out 2 years ago as a guest of the Australian teachers and everything for their Australian championships. And all I could reflect on is like when we went out as examiners first, giving them all these workshops. And then I'm outside at their Australian championships, looking at them, and there were only one world champion after another.
Yeah.
Standard, and their figure dancing and everything, incredible.
Yeah.
So at my age, it makes it all kind of worthwhile to say.
Absolutely, because you feel that in some way you had, you know, okay, you weren't directly involved with the children that were world champions, but you were so involved with their teachers, that in some way, had it not been for you, they wouldn't have been the dancers they were. So it must have given you great pride, John.
Yeah, they actually invited me out as their honoured guest to Adelaide 2017 for the 50th year of their organisation. They had Frances Curley as the chair of the commission, and they had me out, representative of a person who did most for all the teaching and all of that across Australia. So it was lovely to reflect on that. When we went to Queensland then, there was only one TCRG, and all of the others, they were just senior dancers. They were very heavily influenced by Scottish dancing.
Yeah.
Again, we were conducting workshops up there, and then in 1990, I was out doing exams with, what's his name, Owen Quinn.
Okay.
And we went as far as, Anya myself went as far as Brisbane, but beyond Brisbane, there was reports that there was people up there who taught Highland dancing, and they taught a bit of an Irish jig. So when I was out in 1990 with Owen, these people had made contact with Jan Curry
Henderson
in Sydney, and they had been communicating, and then Jan told them that this person now, he's out, and I know his itinerary, and he loves going places and traveling and everything. So she put them in touch with me, and they said to me on the phone, I was in Australia now doing the exams up to my eyes in this, and they're saying, would you be willing to meet us in Townsville? We hear you're coming up to the Barrier Reef. And I said, yes, I'm booked for a week's holidays up on the Barrier Reef after the exams are finished, and I will be going up there. Would you be willing to give us a workshop? Yes. Would you be willing to talk to us? Yes, anything I can do for you. Okay.
No better buckle.
The next day was the teachers from Cairns. Would you go up to Cairns as well as Townsville? Would you give them a workshop? Yes, look, anything I can do to promote the Irish dancing, I will do it. And I'll do it. Now, Christine Portbury would verify this story. Christine was hysterical. She said, you've given them a license, she says, to use you, and by God, they will. So,
but it's for the greater good.
At the end of our exam tour, my brave John, goes up to Brisbane and then flew from Brisbane up to Townsville. And I met the teachers and gave them a workshop. And I tell you, she was right. They had me up at 6 o'clock in the morning. I do not kid you. Margaret Furness was the contact, and she was a disciplinarian, is one thing you could call her. I would call her a lot more, but we have great respect for each other at this stage.
Yeah, so, I don't know her.
Make a long story short, I was traveling all over North Queensland, from Townsville, Cairns, Mackay, all up the coastline and into a place called Mount Isa. Now, Mount Isa, Townsville, I don't know the distances, but let's put it this way. Townsville is about 600 miles north of Brisbane. And I stood outside my hotel door one day and had a photograph taken where I was going for the next workshop the next day. Mount Isa, 998 kilometers.
Wow. Oh my God. How did you get there? Flying?
Yes, you didn't drive because it took you 2 days to drive, kind of desert or Australian outback, and another 2 days to get back. So
yeah, because Jan was telling me in her interview when she came here one time, I forget who she said was bringing her around, and she said, he said to her, we'll have to stay overnight. And she looked at him because it was only after taking about an hour to get from where she was to where they were going. And he was planning an overnight stay. And she said, you know, it could take us 2 days to go on an average event. And she said, we do it and come back in the same journey. We don't stay overnight.
I mean, Townsville to Mount Isa would be from here to London or Paris or something. So I established a fantastic link with all these places and all these people. And Mount Isa, by the way, I'll just give you a little fill-in. It's a mining town. It's in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
And if it wasn't for the mines, there would only be kangaroos and camels there. So it's a place that if you're into mining or working or that, you go there, you work hard, you earn fantastic pay, and then you get out because very few people survive and stay on there long. And anytime you're driving around the streets of Mount Isa, the mine is underneath you. And they say, a little saying they said to me to make the point, at any time, a third of the population are working underneath you, a third of a mile deep down.
It's not nice. My grandfather worked in the mines in Wales, and when he left Ireland, and he worked in the mines, and my father's side of the family worked in it, and from the stories, it's absolutely horrific.
Yeah, I would say now the coal mines will be the worst because of the dust and the nature of coal. But these were lead and zinc mines and copper mines. And I did go down, the fathers all worked in the mines. So one day it was arranged that I would go down in the mines with them. And down underneath, you came into these caverns. They were large enough to house the World Championships. Huge.
It's a possibility, John.
A third of a mile down underground, you know.
It's always a possibility.
And they passed me from one place to another because all and they'd say to me, I'm Aoife's father, you know, little Aoife. I'm McCarthy, you know, you have my 2 daughters in the dancing class. So I built up a fantastic repertoire there.
Rapport.
And I went back year after year to Mount Isa, and I was an honorary member, and I was allowed to use the Irish club and the premises and everything, anything for the Irish dancing.
Isn't that lovely?
So I'll tell you as well, everywhere I went, they did their grades. That
Yeah.
was my format.
Yeah.
And
I agree with that, John. I
and
agree with that 100%. I'm a big believer in good basics, and that can only come from learning the traditional dances, the traditional rhythm.
yeah, well, you see, I established a template then. I had in these places something about 11 or 12 people who were already teaching Highland and
Yeah.
were anxious to teach more Irish and
Mm.
had taken their grades with me. And sometimes, and I come back to this in South Africa, I would be teaching them a dance today and I'd be examining them for that in their grade tomorrow.
Okay.
You know, but
Well,
that was the way the whole thing worked out. Fantastic. I came back to the commission and I asked them about these 11 or 12 people. They want to teach Irish dance and they want to be associated with us. And I'm proposing they be made associate teachers.
yeah.
Now, that is a class, I think it's only been used twice.
Yeah.
And it was at my instigation in Australia and again later on in South Africa.
Yeah.
So they were granted associates teacher status on the grounds that their isolation, they were teaching Irish dancing, promoting it at the fringe
Yeah.
in places so far away. So the commission, I remember when I gave my report, then they said to me, so you have given them workshops to this year and they did very good. And where do they go from here now, kind of? And before we give them this associate teachers. And I said, well, if you give them this associate teachers, I'll go back out to them for the next 2 years and continue classes with them. And I guarantee this. And like, I'll pay my fare and I'll go out and teach with them. So the commission agreed. Now, the result of that was 11 or 12 associate teachers. Nowadays, some of those, a lot of them, they are fully qualified teachers.
Isn't that great?
And some of their pupils are qualified teachers, and some of them are even qualified adjudicators. Now, I'll just give you one name that springs to mind. Cheryl Medley was, she was a teacher at the time, and her daughter, Renee, was a small little girl in the class. Now, Cheryl is still a qualified TCRG, and Renee is a qualified ADCRG.
Wow. And you had an involvement in all of them.
And starting them all up.
Starting them all off.
And getting them. By the way, they're all registered with the commission, so they bring in quite
a lot of money, yeah.
Yeah. So as I say, the grades, the distances are incredible. I helped
1,000 kilometers.
Yeah.
Wow.
I then helped to them to establish their first premiership, we called it, not a championship, first year premiership. And I judged it. And since then, they have their championships there. They go to their Australians. And in 2017, joy of joys, the Australian championships were held in Queensland. And where were they held? Up in North Queensland in Cairns, or Cairns as it's spelled. Jackie Wilson was one of the organisers up there. And the Australians, separate to the thing in Adelaide, they invited me out to honour me as having promoted all the dancing up in Queensland.
Yeah.
And so the commission paid something towards a grant for my fare. The Australian teachers paid the rest of it. And the North Queensland teachers, I was their guest accommodation-wise and everything. So to be a guest and to see the standard at the Australians and to think
Yeah.
that where I was sitting in a magnificent theatre in Cannes, you couldn't get the likes of it. And I was looking at world champion dancers there and thinking, I came here a few years ago and I was saying, and the bastard down and
Down and that better down.
so it was wonderful experiences. At a later stage then, the commission were getting correspondence from a group of people in Africa. And so it was some people had seen this video of Irish dancing and they were teaching mostly Highland dancing.
Okay.
Again, but some of them were Wendy Mays now, for example, she didn't do any Highland. She was modern jazz, ballet, such a thing and all this. And Lindy, Lucas, sorry, I'm getting mixed up. They came from different backgrounds, but
Okay.
they were all kind of very competent teachers in every way. But they had this video and they were trying to help each other out. And they formed a little band and association. And they sent emails to the commission about how do they do this, how do they do that, and everything. And
it's almost like learning by numbers.
Yes.
Dancing by numbers. But I mean, you have to admire the resilience of people like that. You have to, I mean, there's a young lad, I can't think of his name, but he danced in Riverdance not so long ago. And I think he's Chinese. And he taught himself by looking at Riverdance videos. Now, okay, he wouldn't have started from the basics and the traditions and that. But my God, you have to admire people like that who just have a passion, such a passion for it that they'll actually sit down and learn it by hook or by crook.
Yeah. So they were, when I say they were sending emails, actually, I don't think we were so much into emails in the early, in the 1990s. The form of communication, people mightn't even have heard about it now, was fax machines.
Yeah,
you
faxed everything.
Typed it out and you put it onto this machine and it conveyed your fax.
Yeah.
So anyhow, Seamus McAnally mentioned it to me about these and he said, how would you like to teach by fax? And so
God, I never heard of anyone. Now we're teaching by Zoom, but then it was by fax.
It was by fax. So and they asked me about, is there a side step in the hornpipe? Do you tip your leg in the jig?
Oh God, that must have been a nightmare.
And then they were very Scottish. So what's the second position? What's the third position? Etc. So I then communicated with this person. Sue Turan was her name. By the way, I'd like to pay tribute to the person who got the video and started it kind of rolling was a person, Shona Robinson. She was a South African Highland champion and her two daughters were and her grandchildren. But Sue Turan was the organizer then and I communicated with her. And fortunately, I took out last year all the faxes that I preserved since the 1990.
Wow. Wow.
I read some of them out to their pupils who are now in the prize winners at the World Championships, Ashling Awards and everything. And I said, now this is what your teachers were asking, you know. And they took it in the spirit, kind of. I said, never forget what your teachers went through to bring you to the level you're at.
Yeah.
So then
I think people tend to do that. They tend to be very blasé. I don't think some realize the struggles that their teachers had to actually learn. I mean, when you think about learning by fax.
Yeah, like I tell you now, the way I teach kind of is very much by rhythm and the end of the hornpipe thing. dee 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 dum. And it's not dee 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 dum. It's
Yeah.
dee 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 dum. And I was saying to them, say it with me, diddly die, dee dee diddly dee, 2, 3, diddly dee. And they were saying, what are you saying? They thought I was insane.
I counted by beats. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, hop back, 1, 2, hop back, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that they get this idea of of 4 beats. But you know, we were talking about that the other day, about the fact that there's so many jigs masquerading as hornpipes and slipjigs, and reels masquerading as slipjigs. It's a bugbear with me, because you can see the most fabulous dancer coming out, and they run at the stage in front of you, and you think for a second, Jesus, they're doing the wrong, and then you realize that what they're doing is actually more of a reel than it is a slip jig, or more of a jig than it is a hornpipe. And there's so much rhythm in things.
Hornpipe rhythm is almost extinct now. And even if it's myself, and I shouldn't say this, but I stick my neck out and I say, if you want to hear hornpipe beat, listen to my thing on YouTube in 1962.
I shared it. It's on your very first video, John. That video, episode 1, all those centuries ago that we did. It's at the start. It is absolutely hornpipe rhythm.
Hornpipe. So, what was I going to say? Anyhow, I was in South Africa. I went out to these people, and I remember Maya Walsh asking me, because later on they had a terrific input into it. Who were they? What were they? What colour were they? And so on. I said, I don't know. All I know is I said to them, Sue, if you, I will book my flight and pay for my airfare to go out to Africa, and I'll do as much workshops as I can to help you all with the Irish dancing as much as I can. You, in return, you supply me with hospitality wherever I'm staying, my meals and travel, and so on. So I went out. I landed one morning in Johannesburg airport, having flown overnight, met this person, Sue on. My first reaction is, oh, she's white anyhow. I didn't even know what I was going to, and opened my case and took out shoes, books, rinky foreigners, everything, and closed my case. And a half an hour later, I was on a flight down to Cape Town. I arrived in Cape Town, off the plane the same morning, having been on flights all the time. And I was straight into workshops. And to fast forward that, I ended up on that tour between Johannesburg and Cape Town. And I think I went to Port Elizabeth and Durban, and I taught them their dances. By the way, sorry, Maria Kane had been down to them as well. She was a dancer in Sligo. And she was living in Kenya. So she was down with us. And I was conducting the grade exams for their material. And one day I was teaching them. I said, I want you, all those, I had in my mind, anybody who's going for teaching, but I didn't say it to them, they will have to do grade 5. And so I was teaching them that and saying, you'll be examined on that now tomorrow morning, and so on. The result of it is that when I counted up the number of grade exams that I did at the end of it, keep in mind that some of them, a lot of them were growing up as far as grade 5. Guess how many grades I did? 980 grades.
Keepers, John.
980 grades. Now, I tell you, I was shattered. I had to get help with writing. I had to do this. I had to do that. I said, "Let me out of Africa," and
Out of Africa.
yeah,
There was a movie called after that, John.
oh yes, yeah. I went to that place, Karen Blinkett, and to where that was made and all of that, because that
That
was.
is probably the most exquisite country from videos and images that you'd watch. You know, I mean, as an animal lover, it's just you know, it just seems to me as close to heaven. Like,
Oh yeah, because every time I've gone out now, I've been on safari and so on, but I never get tired of it. Any of the adjudicators and that going out with me, we always organize a safari trip. But I'll tell you, I returned home, and again I presented my report to the commission, and about them and their grades and their CVs and so on. And the commission, again, taking on board that what I had done in Queensland worked out very well. And they had faith and trust in me, and they granted those people associate teachers.
wow.
Now, since then, there must be, there's about 20 odd listed in the book now. I think about 22, 24 listed as TCRGs in the book. Now, exams have since been held in South Africa, and examiners brought from America and Ireland and England, and they held TCRG exams, etc.
Yeah.
The result is that certainly well more than half of them are fully qualified TCRGs, many of them scoring up way up in the 90s in their books and things like that. And
they're doing well as well in competition internationally.
They are very much, I come back to that now, but just to add that Sue Turan, appropriately enough, she qualified as an ADCRG. So she's the first ADCRG in Africa, born in Africa, and she's an adjudicator. Now, in competition, they have worked out fantastically well. A number of them have, the teachers, by the way, in South Africa, they were only too delighted to come to the World Championships straight away to see, to look, to learn. And they went into orbit when they saw the dancing and all of that. So,
but you know, John, sorry for interrupting you. Do you know what I absolutely love about, Brenda was showing me her bracelet and the medal on it. And I thought, oh my God, it's absolutely fabulous. And that was the medal that they gave all of you. And she had it made into a bracelet.
Yes, yeah.
And I just think, and I was looking at their, was it their banners that they had done with, and it was all done with, it was all hand done.
Oh yeah, their sashes. Sash that you will find anywhere in the entire world.
I didn't see anything. I've never seen anything like their sashes. But I just loved the gold medal that Brenda had put on her. I had envy when I saw Brenda's medal.
Because that is a teacher who was also a silversmith, goldsmith. And she does all those links by hand. It's all handwork. But
I had envy, I have to say, as someone who loves gold, I had envy when I saw Brenda's. I zoomed in straight away, and she said, "I got that from South Africa." And I thought,
oh, I tell you, in competition, then there was one dancer, Greg Moss. Now he learned from a teacher, Merle Hoffmeyer. And Merle was very much into Highland Scottish and everything. And Greg had tremendous potential. And
John, can you hear me? Your voice went there for a second, your microphone.
okay, have you got me again?
Yeah, just from Merle.
Okay, I'm going to talk about one of their fantastic dancers, Moss. He was a pupil of Merle Hoffmeyer's. She had terrific ability to teach boy dancers in particular. And Greg then went over to Scotland and he joined McLaughlin's class, and he actually came second in the All-Ireland solo men's solo competition. And he was in the world just later. And I remember Jackie Scanlon saying to me, come out here, he says, we have to watch him. He said, he's the winner so far, and so on. But the nerves got the better of him in the set. But he placed second in the All-Ireland Championship. And he has world's medals with McLaughlin's and so on. Another one of their dancers was Bernard van de Kull. Bernard is now a teacher, but he won the Ashling Award 2 years in a row at the World Championships. And they have gone to, they have won several Ashling Awards, including, what's her name, Shauna Robinson's granddaughter. Shauna ended up with one granddaughter specializing in the Highland, staying at the Highland. So she was South African Highland champion. And the other daughter is a
Irish
qualified, Genevieve then is a qualified TCRG. And they're all lined up, Bernard and Genevieve and all those, to do their adjudicators. Only the virus put paid the thing.
Yeah.
The other daughter then, Genevieve, is South African Irish dancing champion, you know? So they have really scored in the competitions because they go to Birmingham Fesh, they go to the All Scotland, they have been to Feshes in America, you know?
Yeah.
Enthusiasm. Now, the first year I was there, I said, I really meant, I nearly went insane. Oh, I'll tell you, what do you do when you're going insane from Irish dancing in South Africa? Well, you know, what I did one year, talk about being, I left the second year when I went back, I said, I'll go back, but I need a break in the middle of it. So in the meantime, they were on to me from Australia, from North Queensland. Was I coming back out to them? And I said, yes, I'll be out. But you said you're going to South Africa. Yes, but I'll be out to you too. So I did.
Don, you have a great life. I wish I had your life.
I did about 10 days or whatever, 2 weeks, teach in South Africa. And then I flew as follows: Johannesburg up to Harare in Zimbabwe, in the middle of gunfire and everything. I was lucky to get out of that. Zimbabwe, across the Southern Hemisphere into Perth, Perth to Sydney, Sydney to Brisbane, Brisbane to Cairns, and then my workshops around Cairns, Townsville, Mount Isa, etc. for the next 10 days. Pardon me. And then double back from Cairns, that journey back the Southern Hemisphere into Johannesburg. I couldn't come back through Harare. The civil war fighting was bad there and the airports were out of bounds. And went back to South Africa to resume my teaching. But you see, again, I harp on this point. I was able to do all my studies in plant life there.
I was just going to, you're after zooming in on my thoughts. I was just going to say, going to ask, one, how in God's name did you get a chance with all of that to hold down a job in UCC? And two, which of your two careers in life, if you can make a choice, which is the first thing you think of in the morning and the last thing you think of at night? Is it Irish dance? Was it Irish dancing, or was it botany or science?
Well, I think of Irish dancing, and I also think of my check that's due in the door from my 40 years of lecturing in marine plant science. But no, the two gelled very, very good. I was down in Cape Town, and there is, I mentioned that I was lecturing on bogs in the Philippines. Well, they have a vegetation up in the mountains in Cape Town, and it's called fynbos, a South African word. And I went there and I studied that because it was very like bog kind of vegetation. And I was able to video that and get slides and so on. And all my visits around, that fed.
You were able to fit in your two careers in one.
Yeah, they really.
Never miss an opportunity, John.
I'll tell you, Tony Nolan was going to Australia with me one stage, and we were in Singapore and in Asia and all that. And I used to say, Tony, would you stand up there now? See that? Put your hand up there now and see what you think. I want to get a photograph. And
I can see Tony doing it.
He said to me after a long time, you stand in. He says, I'll take a photograph of you. And I said, no. I said, it isn't a photograph of me at all. I said, it's the tree and the leaves. I said, and hold the leaf out now like that. And I said, I only want you for scale. And he said, what do you mean? He says, well, when I'm talking about this now, I say, now that's.
I know what height you are, so I know what height the plant is.
Tony's hand there, and that will show you the size of this thing. So after a while, he said, Jesus, I'm only along for scale. But you know, I mentioned Tony Nolan. A lot of the whole thing in South Africa has worked out fantastically,
yeah,
from their side and from our side, because I reckon about in excess of 40 teachers, adjudicators and examiners have been to South Africa. Now, some years ago, I withdrew and I said, you pick your examiners, your adjudicators now. I have nothing more to do with that. And so, like people that have been out to South Africa now, I went out, Jackie and myself judged their first premiership. Then the next year, Brenda, Tony Nolan and myself went out and judged their first championship. And I have one of the happiest moments when we went down to the three of us up to the top of Table Mountain, and Tony Nolan expressed his joy and total admiration. No disrespect to America, but as he says, we can be in America any day of the week, but I'm at the top of Table Mountain in Africa, you know.
I'd love to see it.
And then we had Charles Moore and Stephen McInerney.
It's so exotic, you know, you have such an exotic, I suppose, image of Africa, you know, as an animal lover as well, you know, it's just I'll get there someday.
With the animals then, Charlie Moore had a stand when he was going off, and he was absolutely over the moon. And he was saying, I want to see an elephant. I have to see Nellie the elephant before I come back to Limerick, because I told all my neighbours. Make a long story short, we were on safari, and at the very end of the safari, we got caught, and you can ask Breda McInerney and Charles, they tell you this, in the middle of a herd of elephants. There must have been 40 or 50 elephants. They were at a big watering hole. And one of the elephants came up the side of a bank, and Breda McInerney was in the front seat next to the driver. And she said, Jesus, what's that? It's an elephant coming up. And the driver just said to her, stay totally calm. Don't even touch your window. Don't do anything. And the elephant came up. Well, if he waddled his bottom another 2 inches, he'd have put the... And Charlie was out of his mind, photographing baby little elephants about 2 or 3 feet high in among the legs of the other ones. So we saw enough elephants to keep him happy. Well, so we had another one then. The last time, last year then, 2019, they invited me out back to South Africa as an honoured guest to honour me. It was 20 years since the original contact. And I flew out, haven't been in hospital before that for cancer here and cancer there and cancer everywhere. And they said to me, would you be fit to come? And I said, blow in my ear and I'll be there. So I went off out and we had a fantastic time. What's the name? Oh gosh. Wait now. I'm stuck for names now. But Dara O'Shea was one of them, and Marie Casey, and one of the Maguire O'Shea's, the Maguires, Katie Maguire.
Katie.
Yeah, and the 3 of us, and we went on safari, and my God, did we have a day and a half. And we pulling up at the window and looking out and looking at the lions just lying in the grass a few feet away from us. But we went then to another part in the safari. Another trip we go on is to Soweto, to the townland. And that's an education.
But you know, even the fabrics in Africa, as a designer, you just can't help but be blown away by the patterns, the colors of the African fabric. And, you know, there's nothing like it. I mean, the fabrics are just the patterns, the vibrancy of the colors and the patterns. There's nothing like the African pattern.
So, I was going to say, we went to Nelson Mandela's house then, and then we were having lunch at a restaurant, and this turned out very funny. There was a group of South African dancers in costume, doing the tourist kind of thing, but they were just across the road and they dancing away, and our restaurant was open-sided and we had a terrific view of them. And then when we were coming out, going over to the car, Katie and Dara Nolan, they went over to them and they were talking to them, and
Dara O'Shea.
They wanted to get photographs, and I said, we're Irish dancers, you're African dancers. Make a long story short, Katie and Dara ended up teaching the South Africans double clicks and treble clicks, and they were delighted. And the audience nearby, they were totally confused, like you say, wow, what the hell are they doing? And we had a wonderful few minutes, their culture and our culture. And you can ask Dara and those.
Afro-Irish.
They'll tell you that. Our last singers, we leaving in the bus saying goodbye to them, and they up doing their clicks and they up doing their trebles and so on. And you know, that's Irish dancing.
Well, John, I could have, I mean, this could have gone on forever. It's just hitting on an hour and 20 minutes. And it could have gone forever. And the next episode will be, you'll be joined. You might like to say who you'll be joined by.
Geraldine O'Shea.
There you go.
Her teacher's exam in 1952. But I just, before I finish, could I say thanks and acknowledgement to Maya and Maria. They went out to Africa after me and did the workshops, and Maya put his heart and soul into training.
I love Maya. We did our TC together. Maya.
Well, we get on great, and everything we do in South Africa is by mutual, it's consent and respect for each other.
Yeah, he's a lovely guy. Maria, the same.
We did a tremendous amount of training of those people for their teachers' exams.
Yeah, very dedicated and a very private guy. That's what I like about him. He's just all about dancing.
Yeah.
And so yeah, Maya and Maria are wonderful. But John, thank you so much for talking to me today. And I look forward to the two of you next week for episode 5. But until the next episode,
we're worse than Dallas or
I know, it's like a Netflix series. It's true for Brian Hoban. Dr. John Mary, it's going to turn into a Netflix series.
So I'm sorry, I should have mentioned that about Maya Maria earlier on. And if you can get us in anywhere.
Oh, it's absolutely in. But what was I going to say? But thank you again, John.
Not at all.
Look after you.
That's the wonderful life that I've had. And it was been wonderful because I combined my two loves, my plant science, my marine science, and my dancing. And that brought me as well to Russia, where they love to have me to talk and to buy my books and the history of the Irish dancing. And I've been up to Finland, thanks to a friend of mine, Nastasia over there. And I've been in Copenhagen. Michael Dillon set up the first fesh there and I adjudicated it.
Copenhagen.
And I then set up a fesh in Riga, in Latvia. So
stop, I'm getting jealous. I'm absolutely getting jealous.
One weekend I was in Viborg on the German-Finnish border in the Baltic. The next weekend I was in Riga in Latvia. And then I came home via Ryanair, Dublin, Cork and back. And the next week I was in Prague being honoured for the 50th year of my dance group there. So life is what you make of it, Mary.
And here's to another 50 years, John, Dr. John. Slán leat.
John, came a horish.